Tonight we're going to talk about the Department of Fire and EMS and protecting Carroll County citizens and visitors. And I'm going to provide you with an organizational overview. I could talk for about 5 or 6 hours, but you all don't have that much time. And if they're not on a call, I'm going to have some local units from the Westminster Fire Company come by at the end of the program so you can go out and see what's available to you. That assumes they're not on a call, and that's our busiest station. So a little bit about Carroll County, Maryland. I don't think I have to spend a lot of time with you, but we hire people from all over. We've hired a lot of people from Pennsylvania. We recently brought somebody in that left the fire department in Myrtle Beach to come up here. So we're doing pretty good with our recruitment. So Carroll County, 447, almost 448 square miles. Current population, 177,113. So if you do a Google search and find the number of probably mid-sized cities in the United States that are that size, you're going to come up with a whole lot of familiar names. So Carroll County is no longer that small rural county that when some of you all were growing up here, population was probably around 40 or 50,000. And in the last probably 40 years, it's really skyrocketed. And with that has been a greater demand on our systems to include law enforcement, human services, education, and now the reason that we're here is that has led to the development of a career fire and EMS service along with maintaining our volunteer system. Carroll County consists of 8 municipalities. Some of you all live in those, including the city of Westminster. And what's unique about what I do is even though some of them have their own police departments, we are the fire and EMS for all 8 municipalities as well as Carroll County government. So I can say I'm the Carroll County Fire Chief, I'm the New Windsor Chief, even though each station has their own volunteer chief, I have jurisdiction within the municipalities, and hopefully it's seamless what we do. A lot of good things about Carroll County. I don't have to tell you about all of them. You know about it already. And the governance of Carroll County is a little bit unique, is we are the only county in the Baltimore metro area that remains as a commission form of government. So the commission form of government as opposed to charter home rule, which is an executive with a county executive and a legislative branch with elected councilmen or people, we're the only county that doesn't do that. And there has been politically a lot of resistance with that. The commissioners give you some advantages, and each commissioner is essentially a county executive and a county council person within their district. So I answer to 5 bosses, if you will, because they appoint me and I serve at their will. So if tomorrow I say the wrong thing, and that's why I just tell people about my family on social media, they can get rid of me. But to their credit is they've tolerated me now for 3.5 years, and they're a great group of people. This is my second county commission that I've worked with, and they understand what we're doing, and I've never been denied any of my requests. So I'm thankful to them and all they do for us. Some demographics about Carroll County. Again, 448 square miles if you round that off. Population that's growing, and this is accurate as of January of 2025. Our population density, believe it or not, is 376 people per square mile. So when I first came here, I was told by somebody in budget, you need to go out and look for some rural grants. So I tried to get a rural health grant, and to my surprise, when I went to the federal government site, we're no longer considered a rural county by virtue of population. And the unique thing is Frederick County is. Much larger land mass, and their density in the rural areas is a lot less than ours is. So 376 people per square mile. We've got 64,368 individual households. That's quite a large area. Median age, 42.4. Certainly not that representation here in the room, except maybe in the back. Median household income, 20% higher than the rest of Maryland. $103,014, 6-figure income. And again, that doesn't get you very far anymore. Level of education, 93% almost high school graduates. We have a very high literacy rate in Carroll County, and 36.5% with a bachelor's degree or higher. So we're a very educated community, and we're supported from an educational perspective, both with McDaniel College, 4-year degree granting institution, and the local community college, which we have a partnership with, and they operate our 2-year paramedic program. So I know Dave's been involved with the college, and community college are the best value for the dollar out there. I've got 5 kids, and every one of them, I've got 2 of them that graduated from Carroll Community College. We didn't even live here, but it was better than what we had in Baltimore County, where I was from. And it's a great springboard to go into 4-year school, save your money. And the crux of it is you can get a good vocational technical education, get your associate's degree, and you can do very well for a lifetime with that technical and vocational training. So I think you're seeing a greater emphasis of that in the world. So our objective as an organization is pretty simple. Assure 24/7 fire and EMS coverage to Carroll County. Emergencies know no boundaries. They happen at all hours of the day. And as I tell our people, when someone goes and dials 911, that's probably the most important decision of their lifetime, to stop and make that call. And we obviously have a lot of people that we believe are 911 abusers, but if somebody has to sit there and think about it and they eventually dial that 3-digit number, it means they have something in their life that's out of control. And one of my goals every day is to get our people to respect that fact and to treat them accordingly. Our other objective is we have to assure adequate staff and command personnel to support the organization. We have a very lean, the Doge people would be proud of our organization, because for 232 people, we only have 12 staff and command people. 4 of us are uniformed command officers, and the other 8 people are civilian people with different specialties that we'll talk about later on that support us. Everything from getting uniforms and personal protective gear. We run a pharmacy. We run billing and bring in pretty decent revenue every year, and we do a lot of administrative areas, and we have a full-time data analyst, because in today's world, everything is data-driven. And we remain consistent to our mission, our vision, and our core values. Like many other organizations, we have all of those things, and we'll show them to you in a few minutes. We have to be cost-effective within the parameters of county finances. We're fortunate in Carroll County to have Ted Zaleski, who's been doing the job with management and budget for 30-plus years. A lot of people that don't understand Ted don't know how to take him, but I will say that he's legitimately a financial genius, and he knows and anticipates things, and Ted is a true asset to the county. So he continually reminds us that we're expensive and we need to be cost effective within the parameters of county finances. And that can be a challenge to us because, as I say every week to the commissioners when I meet with them, is there's 1,000 jobs right now around Carroll County. You can go from Northern Virginia to Montgomery County to Anne Arundel to any place in the state, and the majority of them are paying much higher rates than we are in Carroll County. So one of our biggest challenges is not just recruitment, but retention. But we do offer some other things that you really can't put a price on, and one of those is our shift work. We're one of 3 or 4 departments in the state that work a 42-hour week, which you'll say, well, gee, that's 2 hours more than everybody else. But what that equates to with shift work is our people on shift work 8 days a month, 8 24-hour shifts a month. And last I checked, most months, except for the one we just finished, have about 30 or 31 days in them. So to put it in perspective, that's about 23 days a month that they don't work, which enables them to go to school full-time, work a trade, work a second job, or just be a family person and balance things with the rest of their household. So we try to be cost effective and try to offer things that are going to not only recruit people, but retain them. And ultimately, we are incremental but goal driven in our development and growth. I certainly don't have a crystal ball, but based on some trends in society and volunteerism, as you all see in your own organization, going in a different direction, we're not sure how long our system is going to be solvent from the volunteer perspective, but we do everything in our power, both physically and in terms of administrative support, to keep the volunteer companies going. What I've done since I came here 3.5 years ago, during carnival season, I go to every one of the volunteer companies. I think 12 out of 14 of them have a carnival, and I spend one night working their booth. So I can tell you, Sykesville will no longer let me make funnel cakes. I'm allowed to sell them, but they won't let me make them anymore. People pay good money for those. I can make pizzas at Reese, and I take my wife there because her family were some of the charter members there many years ago. So I go out and try to get a sense of each of the companies from the administrative side. And I can tell you, having a breakfast or a bull roast or some kind of a feed, and even a weekly carnival, is very minimal when you put in perspective the cost of doing business in the fire and emergency services. A new fire engine costs $1 million. And with the supply chain the way it is, it takes 4 years to build it. And at the end of that 4 years, they won't even sign a final dollar amount contract because there's obviously going to be an increase in price. And that's the greatest challenge for our volunteer fire companies moving forward. A new fire station today, just by the standards of what we have in Carroll County, will start at around $12 million. And to build something significant like Westminster has down the road, that's the equivalent today to replace that is $20 million plus. So we're expensive. And on top of that, prior to DOGE coming in, we've got a lot of occupational requirements that come down from the Department of Labor and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. But a lot of those aren't bad because our rate of cancer is about 3 or 4 times the normal person. Our rate of cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, probably about 5 to 10 times that of a normal person. So this is a young person's job, and I'm now eligible for Medicare, but because I'm working for the county, I don't have to go on it right now. But we bring in people as young as 18 years old, and we have retirements after about 20 or 25 years because your body's shot unless you're fortunate enough to go into the administrative area like me and sit at a desk every day. So my biggest problem is back pain. I get up every hour and walk around. I've had 2 hip replacements, and it didn't come from crawling on the ground fighting fires. I think it was more from a desk. So a lot of occupational hazards, and just to maintain compliance, it costs a lot of money. Exhaust systems we had to put into all of our stations, and we're still not finished, at about $1 million a pop. Protective equipment for one firefighter is about $8,000 a person. Every 10 years, we've got to change it out under the standard. So we're going to be growing and we're going to develop, but it'll be based on what the commissioners are willing to support. Just a ballpark figure is I'll predict that 10 years from now, we will have about 400 people, and the cost annually to do that will be over $50 million. So right now, where do we get a tax base to support that? And the challenge will be, if we look at some of the societal trends, volunteers have done a great job, and I'm a 49-year volunteer and still a volunteer member of a couple different departments, but the ability to volunteer, and I see it at the carnivals, we've got a generation, my own, who religiously works the carnivals, does all the fundraising, and when that group goes away, the new kids that live off their cell phones, they're interested in riding on calls and not so interested in doing what it takes to run a volunteer fire company. So our challenge moving forward will be to try to maintain that environment at the local company level. And a lot of them are focusing on recruiting people like yourselves who have no interest in firefighting or emergency medical services, but they're willing to come in and do fundraising, have backgrounds in things like accounting and administration, And that's really the lifeblood of our volunteer companies. So our objective as the Department of Fire and EMS is to continue to support them, both with annual budgets and with all the infrastructure that they need. So our department, we were created in October of 2020. Prior to that, in 2018, a task force was formed, and it was chaired by the chief of New Windsor at the time, a guy by the name of Tom Coe. And I bring up that name because Tom Coe is the Frederick County fire chief. Tom's been with Frederick County for 20-some-odd years, and he's their fire chief, but Tom spends time each week. He lives 3 houses down from New Windsor, and I don't know where he finds the time because they're up to about 700 full-time people. But Tom Coe headed the task force, and it consisted of volunteer fire company members. They brought in some people from other surrounding departments. Commissioners were involved, and they made a recommendation, and that recommendation had to go down to Annapolis, which is part of the county commissioner form of government. They needed enabling legislation. That was passed in, I believe, 2019, and in 2020, officially they formed the Department of Fire and EMS. So the county commissioners formed that, and they hired their first director, who wasn't me. It was someone else, and he was here about 8 months, and I think they're still looking for the guy. He had come from Pennsylvania, and before that, Prince George's County, and one day he walked out, and I got a secret phone call from somebody who was an elected official at the time who I had worked with in Baltimore County, and he said, "Are you still interested in the job?" And so I said, "Well, I'll put in an application," and here I am 3.5 years later, and it's been a great experience. Chapter 7, if you look at the county code of regulations, we have our own chapter. General county government people come under what's called Chapter 36, but we're very unique because of our shift work. Our people are uniformed, paramilitary. So when I came here, we had about a paragraph of that. And since then, we just amended it this past November. We're now up to about 19 pages of code. And what that does is it protects our employees, it protects us organizationally, and it spells out a lot of things that they do because we are the only department of our size in Maryland that does not have collective bargaining. And in my opinion, if we do things the right way as an employer, there's no reason for collective bargaining. So we try to keep our people happy, and so we've got a big chapter in the code, and you're welcome to go online and see what it involves. I serve as the director, and I'm called director because all the other department heads are director. And when I came here in the fire service, we're steeped in culture and tradition, and the head of any fire department is called a chief. So a lot of the volunteers purposely wanted to disrespect me and went out of their way to just say director, director, director. So one of the first things I did when I changed Chapter 37 was to go in and, okay, you can call me director, but call me chief with my name, director. And it was similar to what they had done in Frederick County. And it was a big cultural shift for people in the organization. So officially, I'm Chief Michael Robinson, the director of, which makes me consistent to the other department heads. But for the purposes of understanding in the greater group, I hold the title of chief. We have 14 volunteer fire companies, and they serve as operational components of the Department of Fire and EMS. And that's important because under Chapter 37, the first sentence is talk about my authority, and it makes each volunteer fire company subordinate to the organization, and they're under my authority. It also stipulates that internally, their administrative processes, how they make money, control their own money that they make, their own internal rules is all up to them, and I can't interfere in their corporate affairs, which is a checks and balances type of thing. But once they hit the street, once it involves training, their apparatus, anything like that, they have to meet a common set of standards. And what that does is it prevents duplication of unnecessary things. Doesn't mean a lot to you, but there's different size hoses. It standardizes what size hoses we're using, what type of equipment, procedures, policies, things like that. We have an integrated chain of command. Probably the biggest challenge is each volunteer fire company has a chief. that's elected. Now we have training standards for them to operate within the system, but a lot of them were worried that we were going to come in and take over, so we made an integrated chain of command. And essentially, I'm at the top level. My 3 chiefs that work for me, they're next in line. Then comes the volunteer chiefs, the deputy chiefs, assistant chiefs. Then we have a shift commander on each shift, which is our operational on-duty commander. Right now, they hold the rank of captain, and one day we'll elevate them to chief. They're not ready yet. It's a gradual progression, and we'd prefer that they understand where they are organizationally. So we do have an integrated chain of command that says who's in charge. We went out and I spent my first 15 months basically negotiating a contract with the 14 fire companies, how they're going to operate, who's in charge, who's not in charge, and when we're putting county employees into a work site that the county doesn't control, that can become a problem because the employees can file grievances, health and safety issues, all of that. So we spent 18 months dealing with, I don't want to say 18 attorneys because most of them share the same 3 or 4 attorneys. They're all local Westminster people, and they had concerns about what we were going to do. And I think after about draft 91, it wasn't that many, but after many drafts and a lot of meetings with attorneys, we finally had a big ceremony, and all 14 companies came, and their presidents signed along with the county commissioners and other county officials. So we have that document. It's a contractual agreement, and it allows us to put people in the fire stations. And it really gets down into the weeds, talks about toilet paper and linens and beds and lockers and things that you wouldn't think are important, but understand these folks are there for 24 hours on end. And so we didn't want to have to fight those battles. Didn't say that they had to be thermopedic mattresses or any of those other things. They have to have mattresses. And most of our stations have gone out of their way. Some of them actually went out and got engraved name tags for the lockers they assigned. Most of our people, when we started at a station, provided dinner the first night. They invite all of our people back to their affairs, let them have food and come to their carnivals while they're working. And there's a lot of advantages to working in a system like this. So we have that memorandum of understanding that guides everything. And I go out annually every year and I meet with the chief and the president or their board of directors, and I go with my deputy chief, and we sit down and say, okay, what's going well, what's not going so well. And with our chain of command, we have a lot of communications that go out every day. For example, every morning by 7 o'clock, our shift commander sends out a daily roster to all of our volunteer fire chiefs so they know who's on duty, because with our overtime availability, we may have a guy or gal from Reese who today is working at Mount Airy, and we want them to be aware of that. And by the same token, they have to be turned in at each fire station and understand all of their little nuances. We're budgeted for 232 employees through FY25, and that's a pretty significant level of growth in a short 3.5 years. And I came here in September of 2021. They didn't even have an office for me. So I was in a filing room in the law office. County Attorney Tim Burke, great guy. But I was in there in one of his closets, and I had nobody working for me. So the first thing I did was I hired an administrative assistant, and she's been a godsend. Some days I think she's running the fire department. And from there, we went for about half a year developing standard operating procedures, rules, regulations, figuring out how this was all going to work. And then we went out and we hired 16 supervisors first. We brought them in, did some training with them, and then they trained all the other people that came after them. So we've grown quite a bit in a short period of time. And this year our current budget is $33 million, which seems like a lot of money, but when you do the math for 232 employees, the majority of what we're spending that money on is salaries and benefits. So leaves us some money for the operating budget, which are all the tools, the equipment, all the office expenses, subscriptions, training, everything else that we do. So that's our budget this year. And next year we'll probably see some growth, and we're also putting in for some additional positions in the budget. So a little bit about me real quick. I was appointed on September 9th, 2021 by the commissioners, and there was a whole lot of people that applied from across the country. They did a number of interviews. They did some exercises where we had to validate certain things, and there were certain requirements. You had to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. You had to have experience as a fire chief in some other organization. You had to have the national credential called CFO, which is Chief Fire Officer, similar to a professional credential that you see in just about every profession. So those were the things. I went through a series of interviews, and there I was, September the 9th. I found my closet on the 3rd floor of the county office building. So I've got 49 plus years of experience. In September of this year, I'll hit 50 years. When I was 16 years old as a young kid growing up in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, my dad was a local physician, and doctors' kids didn't join the fire department. So I convinced my dad and my mom to sign the application. I started EMT 2 days later, followed by fire training, and I'm not sure they really realized what I was getting into. But my father, who died about 11 years ago on his deathbed, he said to me, I should have been a fireman. That was some of his last words, because he saw all the benefits that I had in terms of salary, post-retirement, and everything else. Although he did well and left my mother in good shape. So 49 years I've been doing this. I started out as a volunteer, went away to college for 4 years in Florida, found the local fire department down there, and I was actually a part-time paid-on-call person. Left there, went to graduate school at UMBC, and at the same time got into a local paramedic program and happened to cross Baltimore County and spent my next 33 years there. And the ironic thing is they did recruitment. I was in the EMS master's degree program at UMBC, and so we did a ride-along with Baltimore County, which I said, hey, this is a great place to work. I can still volunteer in Anne Arundel. And the guy that was there with the recruitment booth said, don't even bother applying. Tomorrow's the deadline. Well, when he retired, just as a captain, I, as a deputy chief, presented him with his retirement certificate. And I reminded him how there weren't going to be any positions. So you never know what's going to happen during a career. So I spent 33 years with Baltimore County, large government. We had a 1,200-person full-time fire department and about 2,000 volunteers. They do things a little bit differently, all paid stations, all volunteer stations, really two separate standards. I started out as a paramedic and retired as the deputy chief of operations, required for, handled all the field. I was a shift commander, so I worked a different kind of shift work, but I had about 290 people on my shift. Prior to that, I ran the training academy for 16 years. I was one of the public information officers, one of the safety officers, and did a whole lot of things. Great career, great opportunities, great experience, and they will pay me for the rest of my life. And the big thing was they put hearing protection, special headsets on all the fire engines and ambulances, and I had an SUV assigned to me, and so I represented all the fire chiefs. We had about 35 fire chiefs, and we weren't a labor union, but we had an association. I was their president. So I went in and I asked the chief, I said, can we add that same level of hearing protection for us? And he said, no. I said, okay. Day after I retired, I filed a claim with the Workers' Compensation Commission for hearing loss, and so I've got these $6,000 hearing aids for the rest of my life, and they wrote me a big check for permanent partial hearing loss. So it was a great career, and it keeps on giving. I also, in my spare time, about 35 years ago, I got involved in a project, and we met at the State House in Annapolis, and we created a credentialing system in the state of Maryland for firefighters based on a national model, and we had a lot of discussion and arguments and all out battles between full-time career and volunteers, so we neutralized it. We went to standardized national credentials, and I've been the chair of that group for the last 33 years, and we have certified over 80,000 people in the state of Maryland. And we've also had people from all over the country come here because this didn't used to be available in every state, and we lead the nation in terms of certifications. So I applied that here when we started hiring. Instead of hiring people off the street, putting them through an academy, we hire people with credentials based on our board. And we're accredited by 2 national accrediting boards, so people from any state that's accredited like Maryland can come here and get hired right off the street. So it's a big value that we didn't have for a long time. Also, in my spare time, I'm an associate professor at Purdue University. I teach in their fire science and emergency management program. I got a little Boilermaker thing they gave me. It sits on my desk, and I've never been to West Lafayette. I've been teaching for them for 15 years, and they just gave me a big plaque for 15 years, and I discovered that they're going to give me some kind of a pension. So I didn't even realize that. So not a bad deal. And I've taught a lot of people locally. I've taught people in the military, taught people in different countries. And 2 of my guys locally, one of them was the chief of Mount Airy. Now he's a battalion chief in Montgomery County. And another gentleman who is their chief of training in Montgomery County was also one of my students, and he went on to get his master's degree. So I've had the honor to teach a lot of people I've known locally and people from all over the world, and that's a part-time thing, and I never have to leave my house. I've also spent about 40 years with the University of Maryland, and the University of Maryland, by state mandate, is charged with providing fire and EMS training across the state. So they have 5 regional centers. In Carroll County, we have our own training center, but they bring the curriculum, they pay for our instructors, and that lessens our cost considerably, and we've got about 20 people working for us that are also University of Maryland instructors. For 31 years, I taught at the National Fire Academy up here in Emmitsburg, and that gave me the opportunity to travel the country, been to Hawaii a few times, and went to Honolulu, and they assigned me a car and a driver. Took me anywhere I wanted on the island, but I had to teach class also, and made a couple trips to Hawaii, and I've been to about 48 of the 50 states. So that was a great gig, and some of my friends that retired and went there full-time, which I almost did 2 weeks ago, on the authority of DOJ, they walked through and just fired them all. So about 4 or 5 guys that I've been associated with for years, they were still on probation. They fired them and just eliminated their jobs. So it was a good deal while it lasted. Educationally, I hold a master's degree in human resources, which is directly related to what I do. Undergraduate degree in government and degrees in fire science and EMS. I'm a national and a state licensed paramedic and a paramedic instructor, and I hold the chief fire officer credential. And I'm married. I got 5 kids, and it's an old slide. I now have 4 grandchildren. And I don't live here. So quick story, when I retired in 2015, we had bought some property in Pennsylvania with the idea of retiring. So why retire to Pennsylvania? Well, it's simple. No state income tax on a pension. Now that I'm eligible due to the recent law, I can get Social Security, no tax on that, and you don't even pay tax on all your other retirement portfolios. So Pennsylvania was the place for me. 38 miles from here. I live just above Hagerstown in Franklin County, PA, a place called Greencastle. Got an 11-acre little farm, and everybody around me is a Mennonite dairy farmer, so I don't have to cut all that grass. They farm my land, soybeans and corn. They rotate the crops, and every year at Christmas, the Mennonite farmer comes to my house, gives me a thing of cookies and a check. And the remaining 3 acres of lawn, I always wanted to be a farmer, so I bought a John Deere lawn and garden tractor, and I even bought the green hat, because my first job at age 14, I worked at a local lawn and garden John Deere dealer, and I did parts. So it's a good deal, and I can pretend I'm a farmer, and everybody around me is in a farming community, and the only challenge is 38 miles. So when I first came here, you had to be a county resident within a year to be a department head. So I told my wife, well, we're going to have to rent an apartment or something, and she's a native Carroll County person, grew up in Finksburg, out on 140 before Sandy Mount. Her mother still lives in the house they built in 1964 up on the hill, And so I told my wife, well, she says, we get an apartment, I'm not leaving. Because we had designed a house. She designed the house. She's got an art degree and built exactly what she wanted. And long story short, 3 other department heads came after me. I didn't have to move. So they don't let me. I do get a car assigned to me, and I drop it off at the Emmitsburg bingo hall every night. And then I drive 21 miles to my house. So I noticed my daughter who lives in Hanover, all these Carroll County sheriffs live around her. They all got cars there. And the answer given to me was, the sheriff's elected, you're appointed. So I try to resurrect that argument every now and then. The only challenge to that is if something catastrophic would happen during the night, one of our people would get gravely injured or something, and I'd have to catch up with them. I got to drive down. The good news is I know all the folks at Emmitsburg. The mayor is also the president of the fire company, and he retired, and his wife from the National Fire Academy. And I've never come across my car after a snowstorm where it's ever had snow on it. So they treat me well. So there's our mission statement. I'm not going to read that, but every organization has a mission statement. And my last sentence of this says, we recognize our human resources as being integral to our mission and will always support our members, both career and volunteer. We have a vision. There it is. And the bottom line of that is we deliver everything with compassion and care. And then we have our core values, everything from leadership to tradition. And we preserve and honor our past, define the present, and create the future. So those are things that we try to instill in our people, and those are our guiding principles. There's our organization chart, which you may or may not be able to see, but I get to be at the top. There's some lines to the side. We have a group called ESAC, which I'll go over in a moment. That's an advisory group appointed by the commissioners that meet on a monthly basis and tell me what I should and shouldn't do, and it's up to me to listen to them. And they get to meet with the commissioners typically twice a year. I've got my administrative assistant. We've got a data analyst. And one of the first things I did is I went out and I hired a doctor. We had a doctor part-time, and I fired him because he didn't even return our phone calls. So we went out and we formed a partnership with Johns Hopkins, who supplies doctors to a number of local fire departments. So we hired a young lady by the name of Dr. Stephanie Kemp. She was first in her medical school class. She was chief resident of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins, and she is an assistant professor of emergency medicine and an attending physician at the Johns Hopkins ER. So she's very active in our system, and we get with her the whole Johns Hopkins organization. So when she's out of town, we get one of their doctors to back her up. Recently, she's also a contractor for the Secret Service. On election night, she was at Mar-a-Lago, and she was assigned as the personal physician to Donald Trump. And she flew on the big gold plane and everything else, and that was after the assassination attempt. And because she was engaged with the Secret Service, she was assigned several weeks at a time along with some of the other doctors. But we need her because we operate under her license. And she also responds to incident scenes. We're going to be giving her one of the Chamber Awards for something she did out on 140 last year. And she can do things including field surgical procedures. She's trained all of our paramedics. We can now all do surgical airways, which means if we can't get an intubation tube into the mouth, we can do basically an emergency trach right out in the field as paramedics. We're getting ready in the next 2 months. We're going to start carrying whole blood. We've just got the refrigerators in, and our supervisors will be carrying a unit of whole blood, and that's going to save a whole lot of lives. So we are among the most advanced people in the country, and I got to credit Dr. Kemp for that. We're also starting to carry ultrasound. So if you're having abdominal pain suddenly, we'll be able to immediately diagnose that you're having what's called an aortic aneurysm. And that would mean we'd fly you immediately to shock trauma, get you in an operating room in less than an hour so we can save your life, and you're not going to sit in the hallway at Carroll Hospital. So she's done tremendous things. And on a monthly basis, we have a great relationship with Carroll Hospital and their folks. We meet with them monthly with their ER staff. We're involved in their new upgrade that we'll be breaking ground for on the 2nd of April. Some of you in the room will be there. I'm hoping they serve breakfast. So Dr. Kent's been instrumental. I've got a deputy chief of operations who I just convinced the commissioners to let me hire. He's my number 2 person, and he runs all the daily operations. My job is budget, the political end, external relations, policies and procedures. He runs the troops every day. And the good news is he retired from Anne Arundel County, 33 years, and he's got a nice farm right out on Route 27 with a couple horses. And his wife's a retired fire department person, and now I've got somebody right in the county so I can sleep all night, although I keep the phone on. Then we have an assistant chief of EMS, Assistant Chief Eric Zaney. Eric ran the EMS system in Adams County EMS, and he came to us about 1.5 years ago and has also been extremely instrumental. And then our other assistant chief is our assistant chief of training, safety, and health, and Dennis Brothers is his name. Dennis is a longtime Carroll County resident. His parents own an orchard out there in Gamber. His father built the Gamber Fire Station. His brother's got a big spread out there in Bachman Valley. And Dennis was the chief of Gamber for 13 years. His wife owns a few funeral homes, Hartzler Funeral Homes. And they've got a big farm out in New Windsor. And his daughter is now making alcoholic cider. And I bought case of that for Christmas, so it's good stuff. But Dennis actually worked under me in Baltimore County as a battalion chief, and he came to me about job opportunities, and here he is, and he does a whole lot of stuff, and he's a local guy that knows all the volunteer secrets. So there's our org chart and all the things that we do. The Emergency Services Advisory Council is a group of citizens at large, 4 representatives. The volunteer companies are divided into different districts or geographic areas. They're elected, and each of them represents about 3 fire companies. The president of the volunteer organization called CCVISA, Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association, 2 committees, the EMS committee and the operations committee, which are the volunteer chiefs and the volunteer EMS officers, 2 career representatives. We do have a union, but they're unrecognized. So we have 1 union rep. The union president sits on that group, and then 1 career representative who's not a union member. 1 commissioner, currently Commissioner Mike Guerin, serves on that group, does a great job. Myself and Dr. Kemp, we can't vote. So they meet monthly. They look at different things. One of the things they do is if a fire company wants to buy a new piece of equipment, they discuss that and decide if it's really necessary, look at the data, they make recommendations on policies, and they help us out during the budget season. Volunteers in Carroll County, 200 plus years. Westminster now is going on their 202nd year, and there's about 1,000 members. We're doing a census, and through some of the record keeping that we've started, and we're now doing background investigations on all of them. There's about 1,000 plus or minus. Organized under their umbrella organization, Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services. 14 volunteer corporations. They're all IRS 501c3, which means they're nonprofits. And what that means is they can make money, they're tax exempt, they can't get too political. So they have to be careful what they do politically. But they all have a commissioner they report to, so they don't like what I'm doing, they can call their commissioner. But typically what the commissioners have done, talk to the fire chief. So that's been a good thing. Primarily, they're now relegated to doing fire responses. For years, they ran the EMS, and they would hire their own people, and that's the reason they started us, because it was a hit or miss system, because most of their people were off-duty people that worked at other counties. So if you can make $1,000 tomorrow doing overtime in Montgomery County, or come here and make about $250, it wasn't really too big of a decision. So there was a huge failure of that, and so our primary focus has been over the last 2 years staffing the EMS. They're allowed a 5-minute response time after they're dispatched. So 911 call processing takes anywhere from a minute to up to 2 minutes, and then they've got 5 minutes to decide if they're going to respond. So that's a challenge for fires. The EMS now is 100% career, and so at any given time, we give 1 minute for our career units to get on the street for EMS calls. And we got the crew from Westminster. We're going to go outside after I'm done and take a look at some of their units. And we've got both career and all career staff back there from the engine and medic. County funding right now averages about $7 million a year for the volunteers. We've separated some of those expenses, and now we're paying directly for their electric, for their gas utilities, for their medical supplies, because they were doing it 14 different ways, 14 different vendors, and it's your tax money. It obviously was not cost effective to do it that way. So we've taken over more and more of that each year. They own all the fire equipment in stations, and our estimate is that's worth about $275 million. So that's a lot of capital assets that tomorrow, even if the county wanted to, we do not have the physical resources to do that. So good, bad, or indifferent, we have to work together in a partnership, and that's my mantra every day to our people. Keep it under your breath. Don't have outright discrepancies, and we're all here for the same reason, and for the most part, we do a good job. This past year, we ran 30,581 calls. We're steadily seeing between 2 and 3% increase, and when you're running an all-volunteer system and your call volume gets to that level, you just can't sustain that with all volunteers, and that's why we're here. Our EMS responses are about 80% of that, over 22,000. Fires, a little bit under 5,000. And then mutual aid, we border on 7 other jurisdictions, and this is an area that we're trying to fix. On any given day, we may have as many as 5 of our medic units into Baltimore County. And I'll say this as a retiree and a former resident there, their system has failed significantly. They can't get people. They took their retirement from 25 years, made it 30 years. They've got a totally different shift configuration. People don't want to work there. And it was a great department where I was there, but a lot of the dynamics have changed it. And as a result of them not being able to hire enough paramedics, as many as 5 units a day go there. That's unacceptable to me as the fire chief of Carroll County, and we're in the process of coming up with a policy. We're looking at data where we will send no more than 2 units at a time out of the county into Baltimore County. We also run frequently into Frederick County. Now, the town of Mount Airy, half of it's in Frederick, half of it's in Carroll. So we have a legal obligation because all of that is our first due, and Frederick County pays us to manage that area of Frederick County. We also run into Adams County, York County, Howard County, and at the same time, parts of Winfield's district, Lisbon and Howard County is the closest fire station, so they actually run parts of Carroll County before we do. So we have mutual aid partners on 7 sides, and if you look at this map here, this is called a heat map, you'll see the darkened in areas. Those are the hot spots of the county. And obviously the hottest spot is where? Westminster. So on any given day, we call it the vortex. We have 2 medic units at Westminster, and on any given day, the 2 units are out consistently, and we draw from the other stations. So now that we have staffing, less and less are we losing units. Last week we had 1 day where all 16 of our ambulances were engaged at the same time, and we had to bring mutual aid from other jurisdictions. So we're getting busier and busier. What we're looking at is, come July 1st with a new budget, we're looking at putting up a daytime unit and staffing that with just overtime, running it out of our training center, and it would be paramedics or just EMTs, depending on who was available that day and has some additional overtime available. We're going to call that Medic 15. So you guys heard it here. So our current organization, I'll go through this quick. My level, the administrative level, we have 12 of us, myself, a deputy director, chief of operations, our 2 assistant chiefs, which I talked about, 2 administrative assistants. They do a lot of things. A data analyst, and we hired our first data analyst last year. I sent her to a whole lot of classes, and she went out and mastered GIS, if you know what that is, Graphic Information Systems. with mapping and all the related things. So she got so good at that, she got a promotion and left us last month into IT. So we just got a brand new data analyst that started last week. The good news is she's got a 20-year plus background with Wells Fargo Bank, and she was a chief of analytics for one of their sections. So data is data, and we had her do a ride-along the other day with our shift commanders. Just yesterday, she got the working school fire over at Manchester Valley. She got 5 or 6 other calls, and she got around to a lot of places. So give us 2 weeks, and she'll be our expert on data analytics. 2 EMS billing technicians. We started in 2023 with billing, and I'll explain to that in a few minutes, but we've got 2 people full-time that do our billing for us along with a vendor, and this past year we brought in $8 million, which goes right back into our system. New equipment, additional ambulances, other things for personnel. We've got a quartermaster. That's the guy that does all the uniforms, all the equipment, all the specifications on equipment, runs our pharmacy with all our medications and medical supplies. Then we've got 2 other people. One's called a fire support specialist. He's a member of Westminster. He's their vice president. He has a 2-year engineering degree, and he's our fire protection engineer. So every new building that goes up, every new development, he does a plans review for application to the fire code to make sure that we're assuring life safety. And by the way, everything that's built new in the state of Maryland has to be sprinklered. Maryland, California, and D.C. are the only 3 jurisdictions in the country that require 100% residential sprinklers, and that saves lives every day. Then we've got another person that does our rural water, and he manages the county's AED program, automatic defibrillators, the courthouse, the schools, all the county buildings. We've got over 100 of them, and that's an almost full-time job. And then we've got a system of underground tanks that are strategically located, which lowers your fire insurance and provides a good volume of water in addition to farm ponds and hydrants in the municipal areas. So how do we operate? We've got 14 stations. You'll see the boundaries of those stations that we call districts. When a call comes in, it goes to our 911 center in New Windsor, and they have people that are trained and certified as emergency communications technicians, about a 6-month process, national standards. They will type it into the computer-aided dispatch, and the nearest units, based on the emergency, will respond. So any one of our 14 stations will be alerted, and 13 of those 4 stations, everyone but Harney, now has 24/7 career people. We just finished last Thursday with Lineborough and Union Bridge being our last 2 stations. So in a short 2 years, we started in July of 2023, less than 2 years, all 13 of the stations we're going to staff. Harney runs 200 calls a year. They've got about a 95 percentile of response, so we determined they don't need career people at this point. So we've got 24/7 EMS crews in our stations, and they consist of a paramedic and an EMT, what we call advanced life support. There are some days, if we don't have enough paramedics to call back on overtime, we have a plan that certain units will go down to EMT only, but we will back those up immediately with our 3 ALS chase cars. You may see these things riding around. They say EMS 101 through 103. They're a car with a single paramedic, and they carry a higher level of skill set, and they carry a whole extra set of equipment if something breaks, and they guarantee 2 paramedics on the scene of every emergency. Our objective with them is by July, we want to upgrade them to lieutenants so we have field supervision for our EMS people. And then we have a countywide shift commander who actually runs out of our training center. We've got a big garage over there where the police park their armored car and the county's command post and our reserve equipment, and they've got a small area there with a bedroom and an office, and they're 24/7. They currently hold the rank of captain. Probably within the next year, they'll be upgraded to battalion chiefs, and they are the person who is operationally in command of the whole county. So they make all the decisions. They call people back. Somebody gets injured. They visit the hospital when they get overcrowded. If somebody shows up and we have reasonable suspicion they're under the influence of something, they'll immediately, we have an on-call person with Carroll Occupational Health. We'll do a drug test. They do a whole lot of things, and they're the busiest people on any given day. They work a 24-hour shift, and if they're in bed by before 1 a.m., they're not doing their job. And if they get into bed that early, I might call them up at 2 or 3 in the morning, because a lot of times I'm up doing work, and I'll send out memos at 2:30 in the morning just to show people that they need to be engaged. So this shows you the 5-minute response areas. And what does this mean? Everybody's insurance is evaluated by a company or an organization called ISO, Insurance Services Office. And they do ratings based on insurance products. Dave can tell you more about it, but fire departments are rated from 1 to 10. The ideal fire department is a Class 1 fire department. Baltimore City is a Class 1 fire department. Fairfax County is a Class 1. Los Angeles City is a Class 1. There's only about 200 departments in the country out of about 40,000 fire departments that are Class 1. And most of that is based on water mains running in a community. So if Westminster had full-time staffing and a lot more of it, they might be a Class 1. Right now in Carroll County, each individual district is rated on their own. When we get our staffing stabilized in a few years, we'll go after a county-wide grade. We don't do it now because if I did that, everybody's insurance would go up and they'd fire me. So that's why it's important. And what this 5 minutes shows is ideally, if we had the water and we had the people, that's what our response should be. So the blue areas are areas that are greater than 5 minutes, and if you're more than 7.5 miles from a fire station, you get what's called a Class 10 fire protection. Where I live in Pennsylvania, I have Class 10, but I sprinklered my house, so my insurance premiums went down significantly. But I have Class 10 fire protection. So if you're out there, get a good insurance product, because if your house burns, I'm only concerned about us getting out, and we can replace everything else. So, again, data is driving what we're doing, and in the future, our growth will be data-driven. So our current field organization, we have 232 positions total. In the field, we have 220, and I'm not going to go through each one to break it down. Right now, we're at about 200 people. We got 20 more positions to fill. And right now, between testing and we had a big issue with Frederick Health Systems, who runs Carroll Occupational Health. So we have about 24 people right now backed up, ready to be hired, but we can't get their physical results because of the computer attack they had at Frederick Health Systems. So by May the 1st, all 220 people will be in place, and the few units now that are running with just EMTs will be upgraded to paramedic level. So our shift commanders we talked about, and this shows you all the things that they do. They're the operational commanders for the whole department. We got 4 of them, and they got to there based on a promotional process. Don't tell me my battery ran out. Well, I'm almost to the end. So we have our shift commanders on duty. At 3 of our fire stations, we have 6 people on duty, and that's Mount Airy, Westminster, and Sykesville. We got the crew from Westminster back here. So Westminster has a lieutenant and a driver on the fire side, and they rely on the volunteers to get the other equipment out. And we have 2 staffed medic units there with a paramedic and an EMT, and they're cross-trained as firefighters. So if we get a fire in Westminster, what will happen is both of our ambulances, if it's in Westminster's district, will respond, and initial firefighting, one of those units will go down, which will equate to 4 people to allow for the minimal staffing of the engine. At our other stations, the other 10 stations, we have only a driver for the fire side, and they have to wait 5 minutes to get at least 4 volunteers before they can respond. So that's not an optimal situation, but our focus initially, I may be able to get this back up. Our focus initially was to get our EMS units staffed. So hopefully in future years, we're going to expand what we're doing on the fire side. So our people work a 24/72 shift configuration. So that means the crew today, so today is Tuesday, they get off at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. And so they'll be off Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They'll come back to work on Saturday. And so if they take one leave day, which is actually 24 hours of leave, it's more than one day compared to the other employees, they actually get off for 7 days. So one leave day to give them 7 days off, which isn't a bad deal. So, let me try booting this up one more time. There we go. So our ALS chase cars, they're strategically located. One of them runs out of Manchester. One of them runs out of Tawnytown. And the third one runs out of Winfield. So we got a lot of county to cover, 430-some square miles. And they respond on what we call high acuity calls. Unconscious subjects, overdoses, shootings, stabbings, vehicle rescues with entrapment, pedestrian struck, motorcycle accidents, multi-patient situations, and that guarantees a second paramedic to the scene of any what we call high acuity or critical patient call. They also are responsible for doing the quality assurance, which means if Westminster runs 20, 25 calls today, within 24 hours, one of the people in those chase cars, the one assigned to Westminster, will go through every one of those calls and make sure I's are dotted, T's are crossed, they followed the medical protocols. Then it goes to our EMS chief, and then our doctor actually reviews 100% of our critical patients and 100% of our refusals. Why do you think we want her to evaluate all the refusals? In terms of liability, probably the highest level is people we convince to not go to the hospital. And I've been doing this for too long, and my perspective was, if they call us, somebody's got something wrong, we'll take you to the hospital. But we do have a lot of people, and a lot of our people that are on opioids, frequently they'll shoot up or do whatever. We will come with Narcan, which everybody now has, and we'll give them Narcan. They feel fine, and they'll tell us we don't want to go to the hospital. So we've been working since we started with the Opioid Council of Carroll County. I'm a member, and our EMS chief's a member, and we provide them with data. We connect our patients to social services and a whole array of community-based services, but we will not let them go to the respite center at the distillery. I think that was defeated the other day. That's a joke. So our goal is to make sure people get the highest level of care. So there's where they're located and what they cover. We're switching over the fleet from the volunteer-owned ambulances to ours, about $600,000 a unit. We've got 8 of those in service now. We're buying 3 a year, so it's going to take us about another 3 years to convert the entire fleet over. And EMS billing, I'll finish up with that. Our goal with EMS billing is to help offset our funding, and the commissioners weighed in on this when we started. So if you call 911 and we come to your house, even if you refuse, you'll get a bill. However, if you're 65 or over or disabled, you're on Medicare, that'll be covered. If you're on medical assistance from the state, Medicaid, that will cover it. And if you have third-party insurance, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Cigna, United Health, whoever, our objective is, with our billing people, is we will bill you, and we try to get what's available through those third-party payers. We will not ask you to take anything out of your pocket, and after 2 times, we'll forgive that. Now, if we come to your house and we pronounce you dead on the scene, we'll still bill you, and usually people are going to call us up, and Mrs. Smith's yelling on the other end of the phone because we're charging her, and she may actually thank us for that, but I wouldn't say that. But we're charging her for her husband, and we came and we did DWFDA, which stands for Death with Fire Department Assistance. So when we do that, even though we bill, if people call us up about it, we'll forgive that bill. But if your insurance will cover that, and we've probably expended about $1,000 worth of medications, we'll work somebody for roughly 20 minutes, and then we have authority to stop if they don't respond to anything, so we're still billing. Those funds go back into our system, and they help us out with equipment and everything else. Our fire staffing, I talked about, our people are cross-trained, and again, we rely on our volunteers. When we do get a real fire, the volunteers tend to come out a lot more. Every day we run a lot of calls, what we call smells and bells, automatic alarms, gas leaks, unusual odors, and even with active volunteers, they're not going to leave their house or their business or their day off 5 and 6 times. So if we wait beyond the 5 minutes for a volunteer crew, then we may respond driver only, which obviously is not optimal if we have a real fire. But historically, and based on our data, when we get a real fire, we're averaging about 65 people. And last year, we had about 35 actual, what we call working fires, which means everybody on the assignment is being utilized. Real quick on terminology, a fire engine carries hoses, pumps, and water. An engine tanker or a tanker is a bigger fire engine that carries a lot of water for our rural areas. Ladder trucks and towers, they carry the big ladders, typically 100 feet or greater. 2 of them at Sykesville and Westminster, they have a little bucket on the end that people can ride in. You don't have to climb up the ladder, and if you're afraid of heights, you can belt yourself in. And so they all do the same thing. They typically do not carry any water, any hoses. They do what's called truck work. Truck work consists of search and rescue, ventilation, which is removal of smoke, overhaul, salvage, which is protecting valuables, and other associated duties. These trucks also carry the jaws of life and rescue equipment for people that are trapped in cars and machinery or other things. Rescue squads, big toolboxes. They're a ladder truck without the big ladder. For the people that are afraid of heights, they ride on rescue squads. And we have about 6 of those around the county. We have 5 ladder trucks. Brush trucks for wildland fires, utility vehicles, which include our chief's cars. And most of the volunteer chiefs have take-home vehicles so they can respond when they're available. And then we have special operations. We have 3 different teams in Carroll County. We have a advanced technical rescue team, confined space, agricultural rescue, collapse rescue, all kind of specialty areas. We have a team of volunteers and career people. Hazardous materials, the same thing, chemical leaks, spills. And then we have a dive team that runs out of Gamber, our hazmat team's out of New Windsor, and our technical rescue team's out of Pleasant Valley. So that's value added. Those units, except for the dive unit, are all owned by the county, and we have joint staffing of career and volunteer. All of our people are trained. We've got a fire academy over off of Washington. Most of you have seen that next to Comcast and down from the Votech Center. We run classes there 6 days a week, roughly 16 hours a day. We also run a high school program for our high school kids, and we hired one of the people from last year's program. She's 18 years old. We hired her 2 months out of high school, and she's going to come close to 6 figures as an 18-year-old with all the overtime she works. So it's not a bad job with all the benefits, and we're still recruiting people. So, talked about a lot of stuff. Summarize, we're a 24/7, all-risk, all-hazards organization. Our goal, protect life, property, and the environment. We're focused on the public, quality service, but cost effectively, and we're committed to a combination career and volunteer system, and we'll see what the future holds. We will transition, we will get larger, and it'll be based on community needs and data analytics. leave you with this quote of Mark Twain. That's why people work in the fire department. Find a job you enjoy doing. You'll never have to work a day in your life.